news channels, we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Martin Daubney, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. Violent clashes over Eid, plus Vindication.
Got threats. I lost my family.
Dodgy doctors mutilated kids in the name of trans. Also, Bulgarian immigrants are part of Britain's £11 billion benefits fraud. And
beyond the words, and today's rulings make very clear that the European states have a legal responsibility to take real climate action.
Let's have a referendum on the ECHR. Plus, the tax inspectors came to pay Angela Rayner a little visit earlier today, didn't they? And guess what percentage of failed asylum seekers we've deported in the last 10 years? You won't like the answer. I'll bring you all of tomorrow's newspaper pages today as well, with my panel director of the Public Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, activist and businessman Adam Brooks, and journalist Rebecca Reid. Also, wow, there was a bit more of this stuff. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. No more foreign legal nonsense. Next.
At a minute after 10, this is the latest GB News, and our top story: the European Parliament has approved a major reform of the EU's migration and asylum rules, tightening up controls. The President of the European Parliament welcomed the adoption of a revamped migration system for Europe, saying it would reduce irregular arrivals. Facial imaging and fingerprints could be taken from people, and they may be detained during screening. The EU Parliament's President, Roberta Metsola, said this is a historic day for Europe, adding that lawmakers would be able to say to voters that they had answered a long-running plea for action on migration issues. Meanwhile, 5 members of a Bulgarian organised crime group have been convicted of falsely claiming over £50 million in universal credit in the UK's biggest ever case of benefit fraud. The gang worked for almost 5 years, making thousands of false claims for universal credit, either using real or fake identities. The investigation identified 3 so-called benefit factories based in London, where repeated false claims were supported by forged documents, including fake tenancy agreements, counterfeit payslips and forged letters from landlords, employers and GPs. The former chairman of the Post Office mediation scheme described today the wrongful prosecution of sub-postmasters by the Post Office as the greatest scandal he's ever seen. Sir Anthony Hooper told the Horizon IT inquiry today a new approach was needed to make sure multiple injustices such as those never happened again, he added. It didn't make sense that reputable sub-postmasters appointed by the Post Office after an examination of their characters would be stealing these sums of money. It just didn't make sense, he said. The Metropolitan Police has launched an investigation following several outbreaks of disorder during Eid celebrations in West London. Police came under attack from groups of youths in Southall, that's in the borough of Ealing. They were throwing bottles and missiles at officers. Some were forced to put on riot gear to deal with the worst of the clashes. GB News obtained this video, if you're watching on TV, of the disorder as it took place. It shows officers being pelted with sticks, bottles and other objects. Many of those officers appeared to have been caught out by the sudden escalation of the disorder and had no time to put on their protective equipment. Meanwhile, pro-Palestine protesters have sprayed red paint over the Ministry of Defence in London today. 5 people were arrested for criminal damage and are in custody. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, saying the armed forces can't and won't be intimidated, adding those inside the Defence headquarters stand up to dictators and terrorists every day, going on to say those targeting us are the opposite, cowardly criminals who I'm glad to see arrested. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
It is time to remove the cancerous tumour that is the ECHR from British society. A proud sovereign nation such as Great Britain should never have to be bound by the rulings of an anonymous foreign judge who conducts secret proceedings in the dead of night. This has happened on Rwanda flights. We will never know who made the last-minute decision to block the flights, but it is believed to be a judge from either Russia, Hungary or Liechtenstein. But on another night, it could be a judge from Azerbaijan, North Macedonia, San Marino, Moldova or Lithuania. One person from San Marino, a country with a population of around 33,500 people, could make a decision that would impact the 67 million or so people living in the UK. They make decisions like not allowing us to deport a man called Wabi Mohammed, who wanted to blow up London. He's a Somalian, and we couldn't get rid of him because he might face inhumane treatment in the country he left so he could come and grace the streets of Britain. Or the Nigerian child rapist, Akindoyin Akinshipe. After he attacked a 13-year-old girl, the ECHR said deporting him would breach his right to a private and family life. Of course, this is only a massive problem because our weak-willed Prime Minister and other politicians don't want to ignore the ECHR, unlike France, who deported a terrorist to Uzbekistan. They did it, and lo and behold, the sky did not fall in on France. Their equivalent of the Guardian newspaper did not implode, causing a nuclear chain reaction that reduced Paris to smouldering rubble. Everything was fine. But it's not all about the borders. Elderly British veterans could die behind bars because the now disgraced and despised former leader of Ireland, Leo Varadkar, is taking us to court to keep prosecuting veterans for things they may or may not have done during the Troubles. Meanwhile, members of the IRA are allowed to walk free. How is that fair? What about the latest climate lunacy? The ECHR ruled that countries like Switzerland, Britain, must do more to protect their citizens from the consequences of climate change. They sided with Swedish school truant Greta Thunberg and 2,000 geriatric Swiss women. This means governments now have to adopt more ambitious climate policies. Get stuffed. Our politicians are too weak to do anything about this. They listen to idiots that tell us we'd be like Russia and Belarus if we just ignore the ECHR, and not normal people who say that we'd also be like, oh, I don't know, Japan or Canada or Australia. Rishi Sunak does not want his legacy to be the controversy of the ECHR. And this is why we need a referendum on it. It would be good politics for Rishi to call a referendum on leaving the ECHR and to campaign for leave. Here's what Nigel Farage has to say about it.
Leave ECHR. I tell you what, wouldn't it be fun to have a referendum on ECHR membership? I'm quite looking forward to that.
Could he outflank Nigel there, perhaps? Here's the latest GB News People's polling. 36% percent of voters say that they agree with leaving the ECHR if it stops Rwanda flights. 31% don't want to, and a further 34% say they don't know. 66% of Tory voters want to leave. So the fact is, really, that most people have only just started paying attention to the ECHR. Now, there is a case for sticking with it. But as far as I'm concerned, anything that gets in the way of border control, national security, counter-terrorism or sovereignty over climate policy can jog on. And I don't care what some anonymous Fruit Loop from a pathetic minnow nation thinks about that. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am joined by the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. I have got businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and author as well, Rebecca Reid. Mark, I'll start with you. Referendum on the ECHR?
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I mean, usually you would hold a referendum if basically the parties are split and can't agree. We might actually get into a position in which the Conservative Party advocates withdrawal from ECHR and the Labour Party advocates staying in. The reason we had a Brexit referendum was basically the Tory party couldn't make its mind up, so it had to bat it to the people. So I'm not against it being determined in a general election or on a party manifesto, but I will be firmly supporting leaving this ludicrous court, and I think this judgment on climate change is the most absurd overreach ever. Look, there are some circumstances in which you need international arbitration. If you've signed a trade deal with another country and there's some dispute about whether Britain's abided by the terms of that trade treaty, you need some independent adjudication. But you don't need a European court which is making up climate change policy in Switzerland based on the right for a private and family life. Whatever next? I mean, will it also start to decide that NHS waiting lists are too long, that houses in Britain are too expensive, that we're not spending enough on defence? These are political matters, not judicial matters.
That's the direction of travel, and that was why a lot of people voted to leave the European Union. And I do think that a lot of people assumed if we were going to take full control back of our laws, Adam, that we would probably be out of the ECHR as well.
Look, the same Article 8 is used by failed asylum seekers in this country, that we have to house them. So the ECHR is dictating a lot what goes on in this country. Even the British judge in Strasbourg has said this has gone beyond the remit of this court and is worried about it. You've named that we can't get rid of terrorists, we can't get rid of dangerous foreign criminals.
Unless we ignore them, which we're not prepared to do it.
Because of this court. Now, you know, we need to leave, and a lot of the arguments I get on Twitter are lefties that say, oh no, that'll leave us like a pariah state like Russia. But do countries like Australia, New Zealand or America, do they collapse because they're not in the ECHR? No, they don't. This is a load of scaremongering. We could leave this and we could still have human rights in this country.
But because they weren't in the ECHR, they created their own system. What is worrying is when you remove the system, we could, but what I'd be very concerned about is removing it without a bulletproof understanding of what we're replacing it with, which is why I think that a referendum is the best idea. I think probably...
So you are, just to clarify that then, you are pro-referendum?
But I would like an advisory referendum, not a binding one, and I'd like a minimum turnout and a minimum disparity. So if Brexit would have been a much clearer case if we had said we need a 65% turnout and it has to be 60-40 above for us to do anything, or for the government to say this is advisory, or just to say this is an advisory referendum, we would like to find out what you think, but that doesn't mean we have to do it.
But what's the
all
point
of those things, because then people are having a say, and at the moment the polling varies, but generally speaking, a lot of people don't know what it is or what it does. A lot of people, but 53% of people still would say they wanted to remain in the ECHR.
I think one of the issues is, Mark, that for a lot of people, they've just not really thought about it. You know, and then they see things now like Rwanda deportation flights, when things are held in front of their face, like some of the fruity characters that we can't deport, and they realise some of the nationalities of some of the judges that are ruling anonymously at times in the dead of night, last minute, to dictate policy to us, and this climate issue that we've got. And I think people are now waking up to it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, to be honest with you, for viewers, Patrick, who don't follow the nuances of the European Constitution, they probably thought this was part and parcel of the EU. Actually, a good number of people. It's not. It's the Council of Europe, predates the EU, many more countries in it. And look, when it was invented, I think there was a place
Winston
for it.
Churchill, we should flag. This is often sort of created as a left
that version is
Winston
nothing
Churchill
we
now.
just had a Holocaust in Europe. There was a case for it. But circumstances have changed and institutions need to change with them. And I think if people did want to take back control, then leaving this convention is an element of that.
And look, I think we're seeing exactly what happened with the start of the EU. You know, it morphed into something it shouldn't have been. Yeah. It shouldn't be. It's grown into a monster. The ECHR is now something that dictates law rather than interprets law.
It also protects human rights. A lot of what it does is incredibly valuable. We have maternity policies, we have fire doors, we have it overturned the gay rights in Northern Ireland. It's also written into the Good Friday Agreement. This is an important and positive piece of legislation. It exists for a reason. And what I will not stand for is to see once again this become a left-right. Lefties love the ECHR, righties hate it. It's so divisive to this country.
I understand that it's divisive, but unfortunately I think we are politically divided on it. Because
but we don't need to be.
Labour, the chance for a referendum on this is now, isn't it? Because if we get a Labour government, we're not going to get what...
But I don't think we have time to have a referendum before the next election.
Put it
the amount of time it takes to... But the amount of time it takes to gear up. But I just think the damage that Brexit, not the actual European Union, the politics around Brexit were horrible to this country. And I just don't want to see that happen again.
You think he could... So you think that Rishi Sunak could conceivably call a referendum on the ECHR on the same day as the general election?
That would be quite a wizard wheeze, do you not think?
That's horrible.
The problem of him... I mean, I don't think it is horrible to consult people. The problem...
No, not consult people, to do it that way, deliberately, manipulatively.
Well, it's not manipulative.
It is.
As you said, there's not enough time. So if we could do it on
hold it in November. Hold it now, hold it in November. That's likely.
Or they could have thought about it 6 months ago and not been complete idiots.
Well, we can't hold it tomorrow, can we? So we're probably going to need a 6-month lead-in to do it. And as I was saying earlier about the Brexit referendum, we're hearing that there are some Conservative cabinet ministers who would resign if we left ECHR.
Good.
So I think Sunak would find it difficult to put it in the Tory manifesto. And so for the same reason that the Conservatives needed to back the Brexit decision to the people, they may feel that they want to back
I'm sorry, but that is really gross politics. That is career politics.
It's not career.
Wanting to win an election over wanting to do things right and properly.
Don't put it in the manifesto. Let the people decide.
Or let Labour have it. Let Labour have the referendum. Let whoever wins the next election do it.
What's the most important thing for you in this, Adam? Is it borders? Is it counter-terrorism? Is it climate? What do you want to have total sovereignty over?
I want to have control over safety of this country. I've got kids, so have others here. I want them to grow up in a safer world. Now, if we can't deport foreign criminals, foreign terrorists that want to blow us up...
But your chances of being involved in a terror attack are infinitesimal. Your chances of being impacted by human rights are much higher.
I don't care if it's a 1%
This is legislation that keeps workplaces safe. That's things people do every day.
And more climate change policies means more money from the taxpayer, from me.
What rights are you afraid of losing if we pull out of Strasbourg?
There's a wide variety, but the way that they supported the freedom of press is particularly important.
Excuse me, I'm allowed to sit on national television every single night and say this. We've got a free press.
Yes, and we are a member of the ECHR. They have the right to be forgotten.
It's not the ECHR that allows me to do my job.
It underpins it unquestionably, and it has been instrumental in cases.
Long predates the ECHR,
and it's been instrumental in cases.
Long before
the ECHR predates the internet. The press exists in a completely different way from before.
We could regulate these things ourselves.
We absolutely can't.
I believe that we would still be able to do a good job of upholding human rights.
How long would it take to rewrite a constitution?
From San Marino telling us how
but who rewrites the constitution? How long does it take? And who gets oversight over it first?
I understand there are practical... Yes, fair enough. All right, now look, still to come. A gang of Bulgarians are convicted of Britain's largest ever benefit fraud, costing taxpayers more than £50 million. But it does get worse than that. Are we being taken for mugs? No nonsense, Lee Anderson. Get stuck into that. And a £55 million government crackdown on shoplifting shortly. He's also got an exclusive for us, talking about a blackmailing near miss. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But up next, it's our head-to-head. As Rishi Sunak says the NHS waiting lists are his biggest failure during, well, just a characteristically non-plus radio interview. Is he the worst Prime Minister we've ever had? Tory MP Sir Philip Davies and former Labour Minister Bill Rammell do battle on that in just a tick. Stay tuned.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
SUV drivers in Oxford will face higher parking charges. Proposals tabled by the local Green Party or passed by the City Council. The motion argues that heavier cars like SUVs cause more damage to roads, are more likely to seriously injure or kill pedestrians, and cause more illnesses due to pollution. However, the Alliance of British Drivers has condemned the plan as absolutely outrageous. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the legendary motoring journalist, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. We hear a lot about the war on motorists, this time targeting SUVs because of their weight, and the charges could be astronomical. This idea first started in Paris. Now it's coming to Oxford. Can you tell us a bit about how it would work?
OK, so the idea is that the charges will penalise people who drive heavier SUVs, and I guess by implication electric cars, although Oxford Council haven't said exactly what they're going to do with EVs. But this is all based around this notion of SUVs being heavier than passenger cars, therefore wearing out the roads more. Now, there was a study, I've got it here in front of me, from the University of Edinburgh in 2022 that said real-world tests found that overwhelmingly the wear is caused by large vehicles, buses, heavy good vehicles. Road wear from cars and motorcycles is so low that this is immaterial. Now, obviously, driving around a medieval city like Oxford in an SUV isn't the brightest thing in the world to do. But the idea that we should penalise the owners of these cars based on imperfect science that's been read on social media, I think is completely wrong.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Reform UK MP Lee Anderson joins me live shortly. He's got an exclusive for us, and it involves a blackmailing plot, so you won't want to miss that. But now, is Rishi Sunak the worst Prime Minister we've ever had? It's time for the head-to-head. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was fielding questions from the members of the public this morning during a cringeworthy LBC interview in which he made this soul-searching admission.
All the areas that I set out, when it comes to the NHS, that's the place where we've not made as much progress as I would have liked.
Respectfully, you've made no progress.
The waiting list today is higher than it was when I took office.
So, while we're on the subject of the Prime Minister's biggest failures, why don't I just rattle off a few more, OK? So there's been a record start to 2024 with over 5,400 migrants arriving on small boats so far this year. That's 43% up from the same time last year. The UK economy fell into a recession at the end of 2023. Despite the much-lauded national insurance tax cuts, stealth taxes mean Brits have less and less in their pay packets in the round. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak's been busy banning vapes and overhauling the education system by doing some really fruity stuff with A-levels. So, with a crumbling NHS and ever-worsening small boats crisis, and that's before we've got started on legal immigration, isn't it? A tanking economy. Is Rishi Sunak the worst Prime Minister we've ever had? Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com, @gbnews on Twitter. Go and vote in our poll. The results to follow shortly. Doing battle on this now are the Tory MP, soon-to-be Sir Philip Davies, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell. Bill, is Rishi Sunak the worst Prime Minister we've ever had, even worse than Tony Blair?
Well, I think Tony Blair is one of the best Prime Ministers we've ever had. But, I never thought I'd say this after the lies of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss's dogmatism wrecking the economy. But I actually think he is the worst Prime Minister we've ever had. He crafted 5 pledges which he thought were easy to deliver. He's failing on 4 out of 5 of them. The National Health Service is an abject disgrace. 400,000 people on waiting lists, more than when he took office as Prime Minister. The average wait time is 18 months compared to 18 weeks when Labour left office. And it's always someone else's fault. It strikes in the NHS, it's Ukraine.
I mean, they have had an impact. To be fair,
Yeah,
junior doctors are to blame for the high level of the current waiting list in a large respect.
If you look at the detailed reports, that's worth about 200,000 of the extra 400,000 that are on waiting lists since Sunak took office. But his whole style, his own whole modus operandi is it's someone else's fault. And whenever he's challenged, he's tetchy, petulant and entitled, which is what he is.
OK, Philip, I understand that you're quite exercised about this. I think one of the main issues that a lot of people have with Rishi Sunak is he just appears to be incredibly bad at politics.
Well, whether he is or isn't, it's for other people to judge, but that doesn't make him a bad Prime Minister. And I don't actually believe that either you or Bill believe all that tripe that you came out with just a few minutes ago, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Rishi Sunak inherited, probably had the worst inheritance of any new Prime Minister since Winston Churchill, to be perfectly honest. We'd had a tarnished brand. We were 35 points down in the opinion polls. We had economic headwinds. We got all the immigration problems that had been left behind by his predecessors. We'd got the impact of the COVID lockdowns. And of course, that's the reason why the waiting lists are so high, which Bill spectacularly fails to mention, something that the Labour Party wanted to have longer and deeper lockdowns for. We should have had longer and longer waiting lists as a consequence.
But what's he done about any of those things, Philip, though?
Well,
That's the thing, isn't it?
all of them. So for example, let's take them one by one. Immigration, which is the biggest issue. He's passed a bill which is going to complete its passage through the House of Lords next week, which on the front of the bill makes clear it does not comply with the European Convention of Human Rights. I don't think anyone could have expected a Prime Minister to do anything tougher than pass a bill which actually doesn't comply with the European Convention of Human Rights, but they want to do it anyway. He's changed the rules on immigration for legal immigration to stop dependence of students coming into the country, to increase the amount that people have to earn. In fact, funnily enough, I got a letter from Bradford University, my local university, last week, complaining that they were in financial difficulties because the immigration rules had been clamped down on so stringently. That was the reason that they gave. He's managed to start the cutting taxes. I mean, obviously, we had to get inflation down. And when you get inflation down, that has impact on economic growth. But he's got inflation down. He's got taxes down. He's put
He hasn't.
Zero.
All right, I'll come back to you, Philip. I'll come back to you, Philip. Bill, Philip's made a strong case there that Rishi Sunak is not, in fact, the worst Prime Minister we've ever had.
Well, I think if you look at the evidence, he is. We've got the highest tax, but you talk about tax cuts, Philip. We've got the highest tax burden since
you are a former Labour minister, Bill. Just bear that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War under this Tory government. They've failed spectacularly on delivering growth. And I think he is the worst Prime Minister ever. But you know what? I think he's a symptom rather than a cause. He presented himself as the unity candidate who would bring stability and integrity back to government. But the Tory party is so riven by divisions and factions, and Sunak wallows around in the middle, and he's got no sense of leadership, because underpinning it all, he gives me no sense that he's got a real set of beliefs and values that drives his conduct in government.
Yeah, all right, OK. Look, Philip, the opinion polls would suggest that he is one of the worst Prime Ministers we've ever had.
No, I disagree. If you look at the situation he inherited and where we are now, we're a lot better off in the opinion polls than when we were when he took over. However,
no, you're not. No, you're not. It's worse than when Liz Truss was Prime Minister.
You had your say. And our brand was massively tarnished at the time. I mean, you can't just come in and have a new shop manager after Gerald Ratner makes a speech and all of a sudden that reputation changes. He inherited a mess. But Bill's treating this as if he's just landed on Earth in 2022. We're talking about the tax burden. The tax burden's high, Bill, to pay for the lockdown that you were all in favour of, to pay for people to sit at home and do nothing for 2 years. You were all in favour of that. I wasn't. I voted against that. How did you think that was going to be paid for? It has to be paid for by higher taxes. You seem to want to have the lockdown, and how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah, and look, hey, Bill, you're saying that it's always everybody else's fault with Rishi Sunak, but you know what? Keir Starmer's getting his excuses in early. 10 years of renewal, you'll say you need in order for you to do anything. I mean, that's somebody else's fault all the time, isn't it, there?
It is going to take 10 years to sort out the chaos we're going to inherit. Because I tell you what drives the highest tax burden since the Second World War?
How could Rishi do it in 18 months?
Hold on, Philip. Is the anemic growth that we've had under this 14 years of this Conservative government.
How much money was left after the last Labour government, Bill?
We had the lowest debt to GDP ratio amongst the G7 countries. We've had a world banking crisis that we had to grapple with. The Tories had no different policies to deal with that than we did. But, you know, Sunak, you talk, Philip, about Sunak having inherited chaos from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. And I agree with you. He had a chance to define himself against his two predecessors, and he chose not to. He refused to even vote for the sanctions on Boris Johnson, and he's not repudiated Liz Truss.
Go on, Philip, final word to you, mate. Go on.
You're saying that Rishi should have sorted out all these problems after lockdown and in 18 months, but Labour's going to need 10 years to do it. I mean, what a load of old tripe, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you're making this up as you're going along, to be perfectly honest, Bill. You absolutely know that you've got no solutions to the problems that the country's facing. You don't even want to tackle immigration. You're going to just cave into the unions. That's your going to be way of dealing with waiting. It's just cave into 40% pay demands and all the rest of it. It's going to be absolute chaos. And nobody likes Keir Starmer. Not even on the Labour benches do they like Keir Starmer. And the voters certainly don't. So I'd be concentrating on getting your own house in order with Angela Rayner and all the rest of it. Get your own house in order before you start having a go at what Rishi Sunak's done, because he's actually done
Philip, nobody likes Keir Starmer, nobody likes the Labour Party, and that's why we're 20% ahead in the polls. And, you know, Rishi Sunak is not the answer to this country's problems.
Yeah, but Philip, I've got to pick you up on that then. You've just said it's not for Keir Starmer. I mean, it's because of Rishi Sunak, isn't it?
No, it's not. You're treating it, Patrick, as if Rishi Sunak inherited a 20-point lead in the polls and he's burned through it. He inherited a 35-point deficit in the polls with a tarnished brand and massive headwinds. He didn't arrive in that job because everything was going well. He arrived in the job because everything was going badly.
I get it, but I get it. I appreciate it. Where's the vision, though? You know. Anyway, right. Look, both of you, thank you very much. Thank you. That's exactly what we're after. So great stuff. Right, who do you agree with? All right, as he claims that the NHS waiting lists are the biggest failure yet. Is Rishi Sunak the worst Prime Minister we've ever had? Becky says Sunak inherited such a bad situation after Truss. It's unfair to judge him after a short period of time. Fair enough. Mary says he's certainly the most ineffective, but the worst is undoubtedly Blair. Don't let Bill hear you say that. Ken says, Patrick, did you forget how bad Liz Truss was? Short memories. No, although, and hear me out on this, there is the school of thought, I'm not saying this is my school of thought, the school of thought that says that Liz Truss will be proved right with the fullness of time. At least there was a vision there, although that vision has, blown a hole in my mortgage. But anyway, 60% of you agree that Rishi Sunak is the worst Prime Minister ever. 40% of you say he is not. Right, coming up. Has Prince Harry's deportation from the US moved one step closer? You might have missed this because it happened just before we came on air, but I'll fill you in. The runaway royal's US visa application has been handed over now to a judge to decide whether or not it should be made public. We've got the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, giving us the very latest. But next, a gang of Bulgarians are convicted of Britain's largest ever benefit fraud, costing taxpayers more than 50 million quid. Meanwhile, the government's launching a £55 million crackdown on spiralling shoplifting going on. Reform UK's Lee Anderson is on that next. He's also got an exclusive for us about his own issues with blackmailing. I'm pretty sure he's fine. Stay tuned.
Hello there, good evening. Well, after a rather overcast day, there's going to be more in the way of dry and bright weather on the way tomorrow. But for tonight, there's still some further rain to come. That's as these weather fronts that have lingered across the northwest continue to push into these northwestern areas, but then also sink further south to bring more southern areas some outbreaks of rain through the night. So it will stay fairly cloudy with drizzly rain continuing across northern Scotland, but this main rain band actually sinks further south into parts of Wales, the Midlands, and then it sits across the south coast by tomorrow morning. It's a much weaker feature, but it will bring a lot of cloud to these areas. Elsewhere, though, it should be a drier and clearer start to the day, but it's going to be a very mild start tomorrow. Temperatures not dipping much below 10 degrees for most areas. There will be quite a brisk southwesterly breeze overnight. Those winds should ease through the day, and actually across the east and the north it's going to be a dry and bright day, a much better day than today, and it's going to feel quite warm in that sunshine indeed. A different story, though, across the south and west in particular, where the cloud will linger for much of the day. We could see some drizzly outbreaks of rain, particularly across the coast and over the high ground. Now for Friday, the rain returns into the northwest. In Northern Ireland, much of western Scotland will see another fairly wet day, but the rain will be much more limited compared to today. So I think many eastern areas, even of Scotland, should get away with a fairly dry day. And across the south, well, it looks like it should be staying fairly dry as well. Temperatures still on the milder side of things for the time of year. Into the weekend, it's a similar story as well.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Good evening. Well, I thought it was an absolutely knockout front page of a Sun that went online last night and was on display all over the country today. Union joke, and there is. Well, you can just about make out that it's the Union flag, better known perhaps as the Union Jack, but they've decided to add pink and all sorts of colours to it, and that is on sale for fans going to the Olympics in France this year to buy and to wear, which led to a great big panic. What on earth would be on the shirts, shorts and kit of the athletes? Well, a statement did come out mid-morning from the British Olympic Association, which said all Team GB athletes will wear the Union Jack as normal in Paris. However, Team GB kit itself is expected to include different shades of blue or red as in previous years. Well, I'm sorry, I don't really buy that. Now, we sent Adam Cherry out to Wembley today to ask some members of the public how they felt about this.
This episode of Companies Fixing Things That Weren't Broken. We're going to be asking the people of London what they think of the changing colours of the Team GB Olympic logo. Take a look at this.
The blue, the red and the white, it's perfect. I feel like, you know, it shouldn't be that controversial, but, you know, it's iconic. I feel like the colours are iconic. Everyone's known London for being, you know, red, white and blue.
I feel like it doesn't really represent England like that. The colours of the colours are kind of random.
I think it's very colourful. It's very pinkish and quite unicornish kind of thing, yeah.
A bit too unicornish for Team GB.
A little bit.
Disgusting. Well, we're British. Our colours are not pink and purple and...
like, you know, some patterns on there, it's all going crazy.
That's not our flag. That don't represent me.
Still to come, a huge development in Prince Harry's battle against deportation. But first, it's time for Reform UK's Lee Anderson. Now, a gang of Bulgarian nationals has been convicted of Britain's biggest ever benefit fraud, pocketing over 50 million quid from the taxpayer. The 5 fraudsters have now pled guilty. There's some of their cash. If you're watching us on the telly, it's all right for some. Oh, they're just tossing it around the living room. Good stuff. They've now pled guilty after making thousands of false claims for universal credit over a 5-year period, using both real people and stolen identities to claim the cash. One of the suspects even managed to return to Bulgaria after his arrest before being extradited back to Britain. But it's not just these criminal masterminds playing the benefit system, with a staggering, wait for this, £11 billion of your money lost to universal credit fraud in the last 2 years alone. Without a hint of irony, Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride said, "I'm immensely proud of DWP investigators' work in collaboration with the Crown Prosecution Service to take down this organised crime group. Today's convictions underline our commitment to protecting taxpayers' money, and it is only right and fair that we bring to justice those stealing from the public purse." Right, well, look, also speaks to GBNews yesterday, Rachel Reeves said that Labour have their own tough plans to tackle benefit fraud if and when they enter Downing Street.
Did say they'd point to universal credit
where fraud and error cost taxpayers £5.5 billion a year. Why are you not going after benefit cheats instead?
Well, I think that it is important that we crack down on fraud, avoidance, evasion. But I think it's really important that we root out fraud wherever it exists, whether that is in the benefit system, because I want money to go to people that really need it.
Lee, Bulgarians here legally have pocketed 55 or so million pounds from the taxpayer as a total of £11 billion in universal credit fraud. What's going on?
You know what, Patrick? There'll be people watching this tonight absolutely furious, just about setting their alarm clocks, for 5 o'clock in the morning to go and do a shift and pay their taxes and do the right thing by their family and this country. Then you get this riffraff, and it's these Bulgarians going to scam us out of 50 million. This is just the tip of the iceberg, by the way. We saw that other figure there, 11 billion in the past 2 years. There's lots of people at it. And you know what? These Bulgarians, the Bulgarian government should be accountable for this rubbish that they send into our country. I know they're legally, but look what we're paying out for at the moment, Patrick. We've got illegal migration costing us, what, £10 million a day. You've got these idiots coming over committing all sorts of sex crimes and murders and horrible stuff that we can't deport. The taxpayers footing the bill for that, and then we see this benefit fraud from these Bulgarians costing, what, 50 million quid?
Well, it's the fact that they could get away with it for so long. I think the bigger picture is the 11 billion quid, as you alluded to there, over 2 years. I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer. Most people watching this undoubtedly will be taxpayers as well. Sorry, but we need a refund.
Well, I mean, look, Mel Strider, I've got a lot of respect for Mel. I like the bloke, but when he's saying he's proud of the DWP for getting to the bottom of this, it's the DWP that's let this happen in the first place. They should hang their heads in shame. £11 billion of taxpayers' money in the last 2 years. I mean, it is absolutely astonishing. We're moving on now to something else that will get people going, because it's shoplifting offences. They've recently hit a record high, more than 1,000 shoplifting offences every single day. But despite this, the detection rate has dropped to a record low. In response, the government has today announced a £55 million crackdown on the scourge of shoplifting that is plaguing Britain's high streets.
Announced a strong set of measures to clamp down on retail crime. That's about a new offence, a brand new offence for assaulting shop workers, using facial recognition technology to catch perpetrators with CCTV, but also greater use of electronic tagging of prolific shoplifters. It's been warmly welcomed by retailers and police that I've spoken to today, and crucially will demonstrate to our shop workers that we've got their back, and also that we will do what it takes to keep our streets and our communities safe. That's what everybody wants. That's what we'll deliver.
Lee, you said what a load of rubbish then?
Patrick, it's 2024 and we have them come up with new schemes to catch shoplifters. These aren't the great train robbers. They're not the criminal brains, criminal masterminds. They're just low-life thieves that are going into shops and clearing the shelves and walking out in broad daylight. It's so obvious who these shoplifters are in communities like mine. All the police have got to do is turn up when the shopkeepers report them and go and arrest them. It's as simple as that.
And what do you reckon about this facial recognition? I mean, he is doing something. He's saying there's new laws if you assault a shopkeeper. That is good, isn't it?
That's good, yeah.
And facial recognition, I know, is a bit squiffy for a lot of people. More electronic tagging. I mean, is he actually doing the right thing, though?
He is doing the right thing, but like I say, Patrick, it's 2024 and we're struggling with shoplifters. Like I say, these aren't criminal masterminds. These are low-life, rubbish that's, walking up and down our streets, looking for the local co-op or whatever it is, happens to be a co-op in my neck of the woods, just go in, take the stuff, terrorise the staff and walk out with the stuff, and the police turn up 2 days later.
There's obviously no real fear of getting caught.
No, none at all.
I mean, that's pretty clear, really, when you see the amount of... I mean, you don't do it, do you? If you...
And the only time shoplifting actually falls in my area, Patrick, is when these thieves are in prison.
Well, I suppose there you go. That's one solution for it, isn't it? We'd have to build more prisons, only. Now, look, the William Ragg honeytrap scandal has rocked Westminster in recent days, and Rishi Sunak has today said that Ragg was right to apologise after the disgraced MP admitting leaking his colleague's contact details to a stranger he met on a gay dating app called Grindr. Now, Lee, I understand that you have something to say. It's not, by the way, I believe, anything to do with Grindr, but you've had an interaction of your own with blackmail, have you?
Yeah, I've had a few, actually, Patrick. One that springs to my mind is, I think it was January last year, where I had this random email from a so-called lady saying that she'd got a videotape of me and it was worth my while to go and meet her at this pub at a particular time and to bring loads of cash or something like that in exchange for this videotape. I've got it on the screen.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this out in case anyone's listening on radio or whatever. It says, "Dear Lee, I have a video recording that may be, what's that, of interest to you. There you go. So there you go. And it gives you a certain date and a time to turn up. So there you go. Kind regards. Obviously, we've blurred out all the relevant names, probably fake names anyway.
Yes.
But anyway, we've blurred them out nonetheless. So that was sent to you. So what happened?
Well, I just looked at it. I thought, well, have somebody got a video of me? You don't know what's happened in your, a long time ago in your past when you've had a few too many. I don't know, but I've always said since day one, because there's lots of traps out there in Parliament for MPs. I always said I would never succumb to blackmail, so I just send it to the local police inspector. He got onto it. They tried to trace the IP address, but they couldn't for some particular reason. But I never turned up at the pub, and I didn't turn up with a wad of cash. And I think the moral of the story is you cannot give in to blackmail.
And the other moral of the story is this stuff clearly happens quite a lot. I mean, we've seen countless journalists or members of Parliament, etc., say that they were approached. I would argue that's quite a crude way of approaching somebody. A vague thing about a video recording. You're turning up with a bag full of cash to this particular thing. I mean, they would have had to have got up a lot earlier in the morning to catch you out on that one. But it just shows, I would argue maybe, how daft William Ragg was with all of this.
He has been incredibly daft. I mean, I've said repeatedly over the past week or so that, what he wants to do in his private life is none of my concern. He can get up to whatever he wants. But I think the thing that disturbed me most was the fact that he gave phone numbers away of colleagues and then left them open to be blackmailed. And that's sort of throwing your mates under a bus to save your own skin. It's not a good look.
Well, what did you make of the handling of that? Because, Rishi Sunak has said he was right to apologise. Jeremy Hunt initially called him courageous.
Yeah.
And look, hey, OK, now then William Ragg has decided to remove himself of the whip and everything else. What do you make of the actual handling of that? I mean, the narrative, just take the Tories out of it, what do you make of the narrative that somebody who has done that could be classed as courageous?
It's funny, isn't it, Patrick? Because when I made some comments a month or so ago about Mayor Khan, I was called an Islamophobe and kicked out the party. And I think William's done something foolish and far worse than what I did and has been called courageous. So you make your own mind up about the process.
Just seem to be very, very slight double standards there. Some would say, wouldn't they? But Lee, thank you very, very much for your time, as ever. That is Lee Anderson of Reform UK. Now, look, coming up at 10, this bombshell Cass review finds evidence for allowing kids to change gender is built on shaky foundations, while healthcare professionals have been afraid to openly discuss their views. So, look, does the report now finally vindicate those people who were brave enough to speak out and get cancelled for questioning the treatment of vulnerable children? I'm very pleased to say that I have Graeme Linan on. Now, this is the Father Ted creator, the IT Crowd creator. Most people who watch GB News regularly or listen to us on radio will know who Graeme Linan is. This guy bravely comes forward tonight and explains everything that he lost during his fight for vulnerable children. What he wanted was for children not to be mutilated at the altar of trans ideology in Britain, and it basically cost him everything. Well, today, he's been vindicated, so I'm looking forward to talking to him. But next, a judge has Prince Harry's US visa papers and his American future in his hands. Yes, that's right. Will the runaway royal be deported from the United States? There's been a big development that happened just before we came on air. The editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, gives us the latest, and that is next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first Song for Europe, which was, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah, it was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. They just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously, brilliant singing, but the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Prince Harry's future in America potentially hangs in the balance tonight after his US visa application papers were dramatically handed over to a federal judge. The Duke is embroiled in a bitter row over whether he lied about previous drug use when entering the United States in March 2020. In his tell-all memoir, Spare, Harry admitted using cocaine, cannabis and magic mushrooms. Acknowledging past drug use does not automatically result in a visa rejection, but the US-based Heritage Foundation, spearheaded by Margaret Thatcher's former advisor Neil Gardner, says the US government either looked the other way if it answered truthfully about drug use or looked the other way if he lied. The Heritage Foundation argues either action would be wrong. The Department for Homeland Security has so far refused to make Harry's visa application public, and a US judge ordered the Biden administration to explain why. Well, it's now reported tonight that Judge Carl Nichols now has Harry's visa application in full and is expected to decide whether it is made public in the near future. Charlotte Griffiths, the editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, joins us now. Charlotte, thank you very, very much. A big development in Prince Harry's deportation battle, isn't it?
It's a big development, and I'm actually amazed we got here, because this feels like it's been rumbling on for months and months. And at first it felt like a bit of a stunt from the Heritage Foundation. They did the Freedom of Information request, and would this really lead to anything? But this moment's really big because it's actually led to something. Like, this is actually really happening now. And there's actually been a 2-week delay to all of this. So it's a big moment that finally they've got these papers.
And conceivably, what could happen then? So Harry presumably could be at some point put on a plane back to Britain and forced to stay here?
I think the most likely thing that will happen is A, Harry's going to be feeling very anxious somewhere in Montecito right now and for the next few days, and B, it's going to be really embarrassing because they've already hinted that his defence might be that he lied about drug use in Spare, because the DHS has already said, look, just because he said he took drugs in Spare doesn't mean that he actually did. We all know that he was trying to sell copies of his book. So I imagine that before deportation, there might be some sort of embarrassing climb down. I have to say, I can't personally imagine a world in which Harry is deported in a very public and embarrassing manner. However, when Kate Moss and Amy Winehouse tried to get a visa for America, they were in fact rejected because of their known drug use. So we'll have to see what happens. But
that's a good point. And, Harry obviously likes to repent for his privilege now at every single opportunity. And maybe he has used that privilege, or has been allowed to use that privilege anyway, in order to go and reside in the United States. I mean, it was there in black and white. So essentially, he either lied about the drug use in his book Spare. You know, the US government appears to have looked the other way, or he lied on his visa application.
Yeah, and it's so ironic, isn't it, that in Spare, I mean, the whole of Spare is about how hard done by he is and how he's not actually that privileged because his brother gets all the privilege. And yet it's actually this book Spare that's getting him in so much trouble, because it seems like perhaps he was chancing his luck or he thought he'd get away with it. But, you know, that's just not the case. He's a serious public figure and he's admitted to drug use in a book whilst living in America.
What would you say to some people who say, look, this is just a gratuitous witch hunt, and the irony of what the Heritage Foundation is doing is that they actually don't really want him back in the UK anyway, to be honest?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That is a very good point. But it does feel a bit witch hunty, but it's an important symbolic point here because, you know, if I was Kate Moss over here in the UK, she didn't go to the US for 10 years, and that's widely known. I'd be feeling pretty peeved if I were her. She lost out on a lot of work over in the States because she was obviously an international model. So, you know, like so many of these things, it's often about the principle as well. And, you know, sure, there's a witch hunt, but was it invited? I think it probably was, because Harry's, you know, written about this in a book to sell books to make money.
Yeah, and all of this could change as well under President Trump, if that ever happens in November time. I just wonder what the reaction will be like to Harry. Let's just say that the worst case for Harry happens and, you know, he is forced back to Britain. I suppose he could go somewhere else, to be fair, isn't it? It's not, his only other option is not here in Britain. But what would the reaction be, do you think, to him here? Would it be a potential opportunity for a bit of a mea culpa and a return, you know, and a resurrection, like a phoenix from the ashes?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but tonight stories have started leaking online about how Harry misses the UK and he's desperate to come over. And these kind of stories are starting to leak out for the first time in a really long time, or in fact ever, because the narrative's always been he's so pleased to be away from this hellhole England that he grew up in. But, you know, these stories are starting to leak out. So I do think there could be a world in which Harry might return. But if I was advising him, I'd say mea culpa is what he needs, because this country actually loved Harry back in the day. You know, we loved him, and the more mistakes he made, the more we tended to love him. It's these hypocritical mistakes that get people so riled up. So I think if he did a full mea culpa and if he was here to look after his dad, that might help as well.
That's fascinating, though. It's really fascinating what you see, because this story broke not long before we came on air. I haven't had a chance to see what the online reaction has been yet, but already we're seeing them sowing the seeds, always saying, oh, Harry misses Great Britain, he misses the UK. It's home, really, for him. Now, that is fascinating and potentially quite telling, Charlotte.
Yeah, I keep an eye out for stories in the next, especially coming from People magazine, any of those US publications that Meghan's got a sort of friendship with. Keep an eye on them, because I wouldn't be surprised if this narrative grows and grows and grows, and is often around, you know, looking after his dad or taking up some royal duties again one day. I can see this happening.
Well, Charlotte, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. Really great to have you on. Now, Charlotte Griffiths there, the editor-at-large and the Mail on Sunday. Coming up, damning data shows more than half of migrant asylum appeals are successful in the UK, and 2/3 of applicants who were refused asylum are just still roaming around Britain. So we have successive governments failing our people. Director of Migration Watch, Mike Jones, joins me live on that very, very shortly. But next, and I am looking forward to this, the bombshell Cass review finds evidence for allowing kids to change gender was built on shaky foundations. I am joined by the man who very nearly lost it all. It's Graeme Linan, the bloke who's spoken out on this, coming out against the mutilation of children, and who's today been vindicated.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Well, after a rather overcast day, there's going to be more in the way of dry and bright weather on the way tomorrow. But for tonight, there's still some further rain to come. That's as these weather fronts that have lingered across the northwest continue to push into these northwestern areas, but then also sink further south to bring more southern areas some outbreaks of rain through the night. So it will stay fairly cloudy with drizzly rain continuing across northern Scotland, but this main rain band actually sinks further south into parts of Wales, the Midlands, and then it sits across the south coast by tomorrow morning. It's a much weaker feature, but it will bring a lot of cloud to these areas. Elsewhere, though, it should be a drier and clearer start to the day, but it's going to be a very mild start tomorrow. Temperatures not dipping much below 10 degrees for most areas. There will be quite a brisk southwesterly breeze overnight. Those winds should ease through the day, and actually across the east and the north it's going to be a dry and bright day, a much better day than today, and it's going to feel quite warm in that sunshine indeed. A different story, though, across the south and west in particular, where the cloud will linger for much of the day. We could see some drizzly outbreaks of rain, particularly across the coast and over the high ground. Now, for Friday, the rain returns into the northwest. In Northern Ireland, much of western Scotland will see another fairly wet day, but the rain will be much more limited compared to today. So I think many eastern areas, even of Scotland, should get away with a fairly dry day. And across the south, well, it looks like it should be staying fairly dry as well. Temperatures still on the milder side of things for the time of year. Into the weekend, it's a similar story as well.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, violence on the streets at Eid celebrations, and stop mutilating kids.
I got threats. I lost my family.
The trans mafia tried to ruin Graeme Linan's life, but now he's vindicated. Also, Angela Rayner got a visit from the tax inspectors, didn't she? I've got tomorrow's newspaper front pages with the director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, businessman Adam Brooks, and author Rebecca Reid. Oh yes, and guess who's behind this? Get ready, Britain, here we go. People cheered as kids were mutilated. Next.
It is now 10:01, and this is the latest news from the GB newsroom. The former chairman of the Post Office mediation scheme described today the wrongful prosecution of sub-postmasters by the Post Office as the greatest scandal he'd ever seen, and he's called for a re-evaluation of the justice system. Sir Anthony Hooper told the Horizon IT inquiry, "We've had many miscarriages of justice, but nowhere as many as these." Sir Anthony says a new approach is needed to ensure there's no repeat.
It's the greatest scandal that I have ever seen in the criminal justice process. We've had many miscarriages of justice, but nowhere near as many of these. We need to reevaluate how we approach criminal cases of this kind. Something went very, very wrong.
Children's gender services in the NHS has been based on weak evidence and has been branded scandalous by the Shadow Health Secretary today after the publication of a new study. Labour's Wes Streeting said children had been let down by a lack of research and evidence, saying the report was an important piece of work which raised serious concerns. The study said as well, the toxicity of debate around gender issues has meant professionals have often been too afraid to openly discuss their medical concerns. Parliamentary Under-Secretary for Justice Laura Farris said it's a problem countries across the world have been grappling with.
There has been a 20-fold, something like a 15 or 20-fold increase in the number of children being referred to this service in the last 10 or 15 years, and that's happened in many countries, many other countries. It's a problem everybody's been grappling with. We're the government that asked Hilary Cass to conduct that review. This is a detailed, empirical, scientific review that should inform the way that policy is developed, and it shouldn't be a matter of trends or feelings or social cachet on how this very sensitive issue is developed.
And lastly, a dog who's fathered more than 300 puppies as part of a guide dog's breeding programme has retired. 9-year-old golden retriever Trigger has fathered 39 litters, including one that had 16 puppies in it. That's a record-breaking number for the charity. The head of breeding operations at Guide Dogs in Banbury says Trigger's wonderful, gentle nature and excellent health and, of course, genes have made him the perfect asset to our breeding programme. They hope in the years to come that his son Billy can take his place. He's the goodest boy. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Today is a victory and total vindication for anyone who stood up against the disgusting and warped mutilation of children by a load of ideological trans activists and Wild West doctors. The Cass report is damning and reveals what I regard to be industrial-scale child abuse that has taken place in Britain, cheered on from the sidelines by a load of virtue-signalling lovies. A summary of the report shows the medical evidence and research for the use of puberty blockers and hormones was weak and poor. International standards were not followed when dishing out life-changing medication to children. Many children who experience gender dysphoria could actually have other mental health problems that need to be addressed, and there was a rush to medicate children without therapy. It covers a lot more than this, but here's my conclusion. Medical experiments have been carried out on children, and the trans mafia, who have infected everything from our education system to our civil service, help to put the fear of God into anyone who questioned this, including parents. Now, if you look at how Stonewall and Mermaids have responded to this report, they've performed what appears to be a huge reverse ferret. Stonewall welcomed its findings. A Mermaid spokesperson said this: trans youth tell us they want services which are accepting and respectful, which offer supportive spaces to explore their gender and provide access to medical transition if and when they need it. We are pleased the voices and experiences of trans young people appear to have been heard and respected. We welcome Dr. Cass's calls for trans children and young people and their families to be treated with compassion and respect. Not a huge amount on the actual detail there, though, is there? Then you have people like James O'Brien coming out with tripe like this.
When reports like this are published, everyone claims vindication. Literally, everybody will claim vindication. The more toxic a debate is, the more any intervention sees everybody claim vindication. The only people vindicated, and I would say this, wouldn't I, here today are the ones that have focused more on the toxicity perhaps than on anything else, because until you get rid of the toxicity, you're not going to help anyone.
How dare he? OK? I'm going to hand this over to J.K. Rowling, who sums this all up perfectly. The consequences of this scandal will play out for decades. You did all you could to impede and misrepresent research. You tried to bully people out of their jobs for opposing you. Young people have been experimented on, left infertile and in pain. She is talking generally there and not exclusively about James O'Brien, by the way. If I sound angry, it's because I am bloody angry. Kids have been irreversibly harmed and thousands are complicit. Not just medics, but the celebrity mouthpieces, unquestioning media and cynical corporations. Hear, hear. Well, it's time now for me to hand you over to Graeme Linan, a man who bravely stood up against this madness, who defended children, who is now unequivocally on the right side of history. This is what happened to him as a result of his brave battle. Listen closely to this man, please.
Well, it would be easier to say what didn't happen. From the moment I started talking about this issue, I had friends and even family members distance themselves from me. I got threats. I got nasty emails, nasty direct messages. Some of them from people I'd worked with for years. Everyone telling me to stop talking, everyone telling me to shut up. Then I had the police at my door twice. They visited on behalf of trans rights activists. I lost my family, my marriage at least. I'm still close to my children, but I lost my marriage because I kept losing jobs and opportunities, and it was just kind of unrelenting pressure. The thing I thought would save me, the thing I thought was a kind of safety net, was the Father Ted musical, because I genuinely thought my colleagues on the show would stand up for me, would see what was happening to children, and would realise that I was right to be taking the stand that I was taking. But instead, they told me to remove my name from the musical and said they wouldn't make it unless I did. They offered me £200,000. I refused because I thought the issue was too important. I thought I didn't want Father Ted to be built on, the ruined bodies of children. And so, yeah, it's just been a nightmare for the last 6 years. I haven't written any comedy in 6 years. Instead, I've had to write journalism because journalists refuse to do their jobs on this issue. I have to say, GBNews is the one exception to that. It's just been a very long fight. I'm extremely tired from it. I nearly didn't get into Australia because the Australian authorities think I'm some sort of bigot.
And here's what he thinks should happen to those responsible.
I think we have to be a little bit careful here, a little bit judicious in how we find the guilty and what we do about them. There are some people who are more guilty than others. Mermaids, I think, should be held accountable, very much so. I think they should be investigated. I think there should be a criminal investigation into mermaids. I think there should be a criminal investigation into Stonewall. And I think there should be an inquiry into the BBC. The BBC shows like I Am Leo, shows like that, which push this ideology on an audience of children. I think they need to be held accountable. So it's not just doctors who need to be investigated. It is the whole apparatus that created this myth of the trans child, which we now know thanks to Cass, although many of us knew it already. We didn't need Cass to know this, is an absolute lie that was designed to confuse, manipulate people, and shame them into thinking that they were attacking a vulnerable section of society, when in fact they were trying to help a vulnerable section of society.
Well, Shame on those working in the NHS who experimented on kids. Shame on them for still trying to cover up the true extent of this scandal by refusing to reveal what's happened to around 9,000 young adults referred from the Tavistock Clinic to adult centres. What are they hiding? But this wasn't just a medical scandal, but a social scandal as well. And to those people in the education system who think it's OK to tell children that they've been born into the wrong bodies and set them on this path, get out of our kids' lives, you creepy weirdos. Mermaids refused to respond to Graeme Linan's calls for a criminal investigation into them, while Stonewall is yet to respond to our request for a comment. In relation to Graeme's calls for an inquiry into the BBC and its child programmes about trans issues, they said, BBC is proud to reflect all areas of children's lives, including age-appropriate representation of the different issues they may face, whilst helping them develop empathy and kindness towards each other as they grow up. But let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am joined by the Director of Popular Conservatives, it's Mark Littlewood. I've also got businessman and activist Adam Brooks and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Mark, I'll start with you. Is this a hammer blow to the NHS?
Yes, it is. Well, this particular part of it, I mean, this focuses on one part of the National Health Service. I mean, the National Health Service seems to have trouble everywhere, but this is perhaps its most troubled part. Thank God for this report. I mean, let's hope we can now draw a line. Well, I was going to say draw a line under this nonsense, Patrick, but this isn't a farce. This is a horror show, what's occurred. And I'd echo what J.K. Rowling said. This is going to go on for years and decades of legal action now. This is going to be like the thalidomide scandal or the blood scandal with haemophiliacs. It's absolutely ghastly what's happened, but let's be grateful for small mercies. This could be the end of it. So they're going to review all trans treatment, and it's been paused, I think, with immediate effect for anybody aged 17 or younger. And there is going to have to be a full inquiry here, and the guilty are going to have to be found.
Adam, I can't believe how many people went along with this.
Unbelievable. And let's just remind as well, there was NHS Trust that did not cooperate with this report. They need to be outed, and they need to answer why they didn't cooperate. Again, this is one of the biggest scandals of our lifetime. I've put my head above the parapet numerous times about mutilating kids, this gender ideology, and I've been called a transphobe, a bigot. I've had threats myself. I've had my business targeted because I speak out about this. You know, we have got a serious problem now where the normalisation of cutting body parts off or changing gender, that is not normal. And this is not me attacking trans people.
It's about kids, isn't it?
Right? This is not normal. This is an extreme
it's not normal,
action.
It's not normal, but it's very unusual. And we keep using the word mutilating here. I just want to clarify. When people are saying mutilating, are you referring to surgery or to...
I'm referring to both. So surgery, which this, I appreciate, does not necessarily cover.
Not in this country.
So surgery is not...
But putting someone on puberty blockers and hormone treatment, etc., I think does lead to mutilation.
But 4 times in the last 15 minutes, we have referred to mutilating children.
Yes, and
then we've just clarified just now that we were not mutilating children. Whether or not you're old enough...
It depends what your definition of it is.
You're not a child at 17 or 18.
I think putting kids on puberty blockers and putting them on hormones, etc., which physically
So you think it's a mutilation?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I agree.
So when we're talking about mutilating, we are not talking about surgery, we're talking about puberty blockers, and those are two different things. Now, I personally don't believe in either of those things for under 18s. I personally believe that social transition is fine and medical transition should be for adults. However, I think that really exemplifies how this debate has got so ghastly that we are using words like mutilating kids to try and make this as dramatic and painful as possible, when it's already dramatic and painful. Your child needing any additional medical care is already a parent's worst nightmare. We don't need to ham this up and make it worse.
Adam, it was traumatic and painful for Graeme Linan, wasn't it?
That's awful what's happened to this man. He's been attacked, he's lost his livelihood, he's lost friends, he's lost family for telling it as it is, and he's now been vindicated. Again, myself on a lot smaller scale than Graeme, I've been attacked and I've been threatened because of it, but I carry on talking about it because I believe kids cannot be trans. We've got a serious mental health issue.
Can kids be gay?
Of course they can be gay.
So you...
No, but they cannot change their gender. And at the end of hold on, please let me speak. Let me speak. Even the report says about the mental health issue, we've got a large amount of referrals that are being diagnosed as autistic. There needs to be further investigation, and I think declaring someone as trans can be the easy way out.
It was a bit like the Wild West from what this report says.
Well, what I find so disturbing about this, and where I disagree with Rebecca, I think you do need to use pretty direct language here, because what's happened is a total tragedy. I mean, I don't think we should pretend that this is a minor incident. This is horrific.
I'm not. I'm asking for accuracy. I'm not downplaying.
Report, well, I think children have been mutilated. And what the Cass report...
Mutilation definitively is
well, I mean, this is
cutting.
horrific child abuse. Let's call it.
Okay, fine.
Let's call it that.
That's opinion, but
horrific
fine.
child abuse. And I'm not going to recoil from
irreversibly damaging
here's the
kids.
problem, though.
Again, that's
what this
subjective.
report shows is that we have been infiltrated by ideologues, that the medical scientific basis for this was flimsy. Now, it's always a tragedy if we operate on the wrong medical premise and then we discover latterly that we've given the wrong drug or the wrong drugs cause deformity. That's always a tragedy. But here, shaky foundations from the outset. This was ideological, not medical or scientific.
It has the same problem that pregnancy and medication does. It's not ethical to do studies on children, as it is not with pregnant people. Therefore, you cannot do a study about what's appropriate and what not. Every parent in this situation was acting from what they thought was the best. Now, I'm perfectly willing to accept that they may have been wrong, but nobody did this maliciously. This is parents trying to get it right for their kids. I put a lot of trust in parents, because all parents love their children.
And just quickly, these doctors couldn't speak out because these trans activists were violent, they were threatening, and they didn't want to lose their job. They didn't want to be labelled a transphobe.
Who was violent?
Who was violent? Please, trans activists are some of the most violent people out there.
What act of violence?
Have you not seen the masked? Have you not seen the masked trans activists at all the women's rights events?
Absolutely, I go to women's rights events.
It is toxic, and that is the toxic that they're talking about in the report.
All I'm asking is that we use words that mean what we actually want them to mean, not what we just feel suits us.
Horrific child abuse.
If it makes us feel better, let's use that. OK, right, look, thank you very much. Now, an NHS spokesman said NHS England is very grateful to Dr Cass and her team for their comprehensive work on this important review over the past 4 years. The NHS has made significant progress towards establishing a fundamentally different gender service for children and young people by stopping the routine use of puberty-suppressing hormones and opening the first of up to 8 new regional centres delivering a different model of care. And Robbie Dos Santos, Director of Campaigns and Human Rights at LGBT plus rights organisation Stonewall, has said what is important above all is that trans and gender diverse children get the quality healthcare that they need and deserve. Right, look, coming up. Do these pictures look like the scenes from a civilised nation? Yes, I'll be showing you those shortly. There we are. I mean, look at this, OK? So find out exactly what happened when riot police were called when Islamic Eid celebrations in London turned dangerous last night. But next, damning data shows more than half of migrant asylum appeals are successful in the UK. But I think this is worse. 2/3 of refused applicants are still here. So have successive governments just failed the British people? Director of Migration Watch, Dr Mike Jones, joins me live, and that's in just a tick. Stay tuned.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who, at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the red wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight on GB News. All of tomorrow's newspaper front pages are coming your way very shortly. But first, shocking new analysis has revealed that judges have overturned Home Office decisions and allowed asylum seekers to stay in the UK in 51% of cases since 2021. In one case, an immigration judge ruled that a convicted sex offender could remain in the UK because he'd be at risk of mob violence in his home country of Afghanistan. A Bangladeshi man who was locked up for 12 years for murdering his wife successfully appealed the Home Office's decision to remove him by arguing that his conversion to Christianity would put him at risk in Bangladesh. Sound familiar, anyone? The Home Office data also shows that from 2011, more than 50,000 people who were refused asylum have remained in the UK illegally. OK? 50,000 people who we have refused asylum have just remained in the UK illegally. Welcome to the show now, Director of Migration Watch UK. It's Mike Jones. Mike, great to see you. Look, what do you make of this? These numbers are stark. We're not deporting anyone, really, are we?
Figures are shocking. I mean, the most fundamental question in asylum policy or illegal migration policy is if somebody enters your country illegally, or if they apply for asylum and they're refused, can you deport them? That's the most fundamental question. Now, in the vast majority of cases, the answer to that question is no, we can't deport them. There are some exceptions. The reason why the number of Albanians crossing the English Channel illegally has declined is because we have a returns policy with that country. But in most cases, countries are deemed unsafe. We can't deport them to their country of origin.
And I think many people will want to know how on earth have we managed to have 50,000 people who we have refused asylum to just wandering the streets of Britain, living here? Will they still be claiming benefits? If they're not claiming benefits, presumably they're living a life of crime and wandering around the streets. It's just incredibly disturbing, Mike, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it goes back to the legal system that we have. There's the legal aspect and there's the operational aspect. Essentially, for the asylum system to function properly, you need a legal system that allows you to deport people to their country of origin. So we have the Human Rights Act that enshrines the European Convention of Human Rights into British law. We have what's called the principle of non-refoulement, So if somebody is here from an unsafe country, you can't actually deport them to their country of origin. It's very difficult to do this. My personal view is I think this legislation is out of date, it's not fit for purpose. I believe it's de-democratized the asylum system. I don't believe the state can perform its proper duties in terms of enforcing border controls. And yeah, it needs to be changed, but politicians, unfortunately, won't address this.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, someone who's, would be at risk of mob violence in his home country of Afghanistan, a convicted sex offender. I mean, what I want to know is, where are all the Afghan women who we should be letting in? Where are all the Afghan children who are fleeing these people? Why is it that we are getting Afghan sex offenders instead and then having to keep them? It doesn't really seem fair.
Yeah, I mean, I received a phone call recently from a member of the public, and they referred to a story in the Daily Telegraph, and four Afghan illegal immigrants were being tried for sex offences. And, his argument was, well, the lawyers focus on their human rights. Well, what about the human rights of the victims? And, there's a huge trade-off here. I think the legal system as currently constituted is incompatible with national security and the democratic will of the British people.
Yeah, I mean, there appears to be very little point in even trying to get rid of anybody at the minute. So let's assume, well, we don't have to assume, we know that quite a lot of people are just granted asylum first time around anyway. So let's take them out of it. Then of the people who are rejected, half of those are then granted asylum at the second attempt. If you're in the case of Abdulazidi, for example, you may be granted it at the third attempt. And then of those people who we have decided to categorically refuse asylum to, which will be a fraction, really, of all of those people who initially came over here, 50,000 of them are still wandering around on the streets, living in Britain. It is an absolute joke. Dr. Mike, thank you very, very much. It's always great to have you on the show. It's Dr. Mike Jones there of Migration Watch UK. Now, a Home Office spokesperson said this: "We stand firm on our long-standing policy that those without a right to stay in the UK will be removed. Our Illegal Migration Act makes this possible, as people who enter the UK illegally will have their asylum claims and human rights claims declared inadmissible. Each asylum application is individually assessed, including decisions on removal of individuals. Where people have previously been refused asylum in the UK, a fresh asylum claim can be made through legal representation." Look, how on earth can we get rid of half of these people if we remain part of the ECHR? It's been a massive topic, this, but seriously, how can we do it? We can turn them down all we want, but if it's going to end up in a court in Strasbourg with some completely anonymous judge from a minnow nation deciding in the dead of night that we cannot deport these people, then realistically, what is the point of any border control whatsoever? Coming up, don't miss the footage of Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner being greeted by tax inspectors. Yes, that's right. Not real ones, I may add. While out campaigning in Teesside, she stands firm over a capital gains and electoral roll scandal. Plus, violence mars Eid celebrations in the capital. But next, I will deliver to you the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. They're hot off the press. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We are on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Well, after a rather overcast day, there's going to be more in the way of dry and bright weather on the way tomorrow. But for tonight, there's still some further rain to come. That's as these weather fronts that have lingered across the northwest continue to push into these northwestern areas, but then also sink further south to bring more southern areas some outbreaks of rain through the night. So it will stay fairly cloudy with drizzly rain continuing across northern Scotland, but this main rain band actually sinks further south into parts of Wales, the Midlands, and then it sits across the south coast by tomorrow morning. It's a much weaker feature, but it will bring a lot of cloud to these areas. Elsewhere, though, it should be a drier and clearer start to the day, but it's going to be a very mild start tomorrow. Temperatures not dipping much below 10 degrees for most areas. There will be quite a brisk southwesterly breeze overnight. Those winds should ease through the day, and actually across the east and the north it's going to be a dry and bright day, a much better day than today, and it's going to feel quite warm in that sunshine indeed. A different story, though, across the south and west in particular, where the cloud will linger for much of the day. We could see some drizzly outbreaks of rain, particularly across the coast and over the high ground. Now for Friday, the rain returns into the northwest in Northern Ireland. Much of western Scotland will see another fairly wet day, but the rain will be much more limited compared to today. So I think many eastern areas, even of Scotland, should get away with a fairly dry day. And across the south, well, it looks like it should be staying fairly dry as well. Temperatures still on the milder side of things for the time of year. Into the weekend, it's a similar story as well. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panelists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight, only on GB News, and it is time now to bring you tomorrow's news tonight with the very first front pages. Right, let's have a look at the Metro. Student died hooked on big nitrous oxide canisters. That's 3 bottles of laughing gas a day. A student who died from abusing laughing gas was inhaling 2 or 3 big bottles a day. Apparently she was only 24, bless her, a truly beautiful and gentle soul. She's been described as emergency staff treated her, but she died 24 hours later, apparently due to blood clots in her lungs. Gosh, The Independent. The hounding of Angela Rayner is an outrageous declaration of class warfare, says John Rentoul. There we go. Well, we can all take that to the bank then, can't we? Don't appease Putin. Cameron snubs Trump-Ukraine peace plan. Foreign Secretary urges the US to stand up to bullies and commit billions more to Zelensky. Let's go to the Eye. Labour plans to fix UK buses with public ownership of failing services. Now, this is interesting. The party vows to resolve bus crisis by effectively nationalising services in the first term of office. Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Haigh says the plan will create or save 1,300 bus routes. Let's go to the Daily Express. Radical NHS plan to fast-track care and free up beds. Patients are benefiting from quicker treatment, which crucially is freeing up hospital beds in a radical shake-up of healthcare. So this is them doing a bit of PR for Rishi Sunak there, as of course is their right. The Times, sickness claims rise hits Tory heartlands. Incapacity benefit up by 1/3 in affluent areas. Every constituency in Britain had a rise in sickness benefit claims last year, with some of the biggest being recorded in Conservative areas. In affluent southern areas, the number of people claiming the main incapacity benefit jumped by 1/3 or more than a year. So there we go. There's also there, of course, the gender clinics in Minister's sites after refusing to share data. We touched on that, or we more than touched on it. We got stuck right into it, actually, at the top of the 10 o'clock hour there. Look, I'm going to focus a little bit here on, I think, the front of the Eye, which is Labour plans to fix UK buses with public ownership. Mark, I'll come to you on this. This is, what, it's nationalisation, isn't it? Can we expect more of this under a Labour government, do you think?
Yeah, we can. I mean, some of the privatisations under the Tories have been botched, I think, particularly the rail privatisation. They should have sold off the the track and the routes together. But the idea that if you put politicians and the state in charge of things, they're going to function better, absolutely crazy idea. I mean, our buses, if run by the Minister for Buses, are not going to improve at all. But we will see Labour leaning in this direction. Here's the problem, though. They've got no money to nationalise things with.
Well, I tell you, talking of money, all right, I can play you a little clip shortly because, look, she can run from scrutiny all she likes, but tax protesters in Teesside today proved that Angela Rayner can't hide forever. Here we go. Yes, OK, so let's just play that again there and keep it on. There we go, there we go. Angela Rayner, it says tax dodger on it, and there were people with bright yellow vests with tax inspectors written across the back of them, following her around. So Rayner and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves were forced to flee out the back door of a pub. We've all been there, to be fair. This afternoon, after a campaign event was hijacked, it comes the same day that Labour's deputy leader was branded a hypocrite after it emerged that she demanded Tory MP Jill Mortimer publish her tax returns, which she continues to refuse to publish her own. Adam, look, I mean, you know, you've got people openly taking the mickey now. She's getting followed around by people with tax inspector on their back and banners everywhere she goes.
Yeah, look, I don't like this sort of intimidation of MPs. I don't agree with Angela Rayner on basically anything, to be fair. I've met her, she was a nice person, she was kind to me, but I can't advocate that. And I think it all stems from Labour a few years ago saying about hounding Tory MPs. You had John McDonnell, you had comments from David Lammy. Now it's coming back to bite them. These tactics are coming back on them, and I think it's wrong.
Yeah, well, what do you make of this? I mean, she could end this all, couldn't she, by publishing the advice that she's got or coming clean with a few things?
I think it's very tied up with her personal experience with her husband and her having children. I think it's very private and personal. So, and having recently done quite a similar thing, I can see why you wouldn't want to go further into it. But I disagree with Adam, but what I think is nice is we're both consistent. Adam feels like you shouldn't do that to MPs, whichever side of the thing they're on. I feel like you should be able to do that to MPs, whichever side they're on. But what's important, I think, is that we should stay consistent. So whatever we expect should be right for both sides, left and right.
Well, go on, Mark. What's your view on the Angela Rayner tax? And also, the other thing that is the electoral roll stuff. People seem to be ignoring that.
It's quite a complex thing over the Rayner tax dodge allegation. I should say on the protest, I mean, I've only seen that very small clip, but it seeed to me wholly peaceful. They weren't sort of
I think it would feel. I think it would feel a bit worrying.
Well, it might.
I imagine it would.
I mean, I think it's OK for people to hold banners against politicians if there's not.
But following around, I think if you advocate that, then it's fine.
The Labour Party took money from Just Stop Oil. And Just Stop Oil are
and the Tories took it from that guy who was racist, Diane Abbott. We can't talk about donors because everyone's donors are horrible.
From what I've seen, that seems to me within the right of freedom of speech and expression without being too aggressive or violent. On Rayner's own taxes, though, she's got a problem here. And I agree with Rebecca that these are private matters, but she has made a large chunk of her career demanding incredible transparency from her political opponents and is now reluctant to provide it herself. It was not enough when Nadeem Zahawi said, oh, I've had some expert advice. No, that wasn't enough. Jill Mortimer, she had to release all of her tax returns. So when it comes to Angela Rayner herself, apparently different rules apply. She doesn't need to release the expert advice, in my view, but she needs to do a 30-minute interview explaining why she was on the right side.
But it's the same thing, it's consistency.
She snookered herself. I think the story snookered herself. From what I gather, the allegations is that if she says one thing, she could be in trouble for the other. If she says the other thing, she could be in trouble there.
Of course, she could have
got to get her story
Or she might not have done any of them, and it might be wrong.
She
might have privacy.
Interview. But you sit down with Patrick, do a half-hour interview, and he'll get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely. The offer has actually been repeatedly made. So, yes, not far off getting a two-word response to that, though, I think it's fair to say. Now,
I'll do it if you like.
What? Interview Angela Rayner?
Yeah, we'll borrow the big table over there.
Right, the Metropolitan Police... I'm serious story now, ish. The Metropolitan Police has launched an investigation following several outbreaks of disorder during Eid celebrations in West London. Officers suddenly came under attack last night from groups of youths in Southall who threw bottles and other missiles at them. This footage is pretty astonishing. One 15-year-old suspect has since been arrested for a public order offence, with the Met saying this behaviour is completely unacceptable. And we will be reviewing what happened to establish what action can be taken now. The police, of course, had earlier wished everybody a happy Eid. Coming up, Queen Letizia of Spain, is that right? Yeah, well, that's the right pronunciation. I'm fluent. Makes history as she breaks tradition to appoint the first woman as the head of the Queen's Secretariat. Progress or virtue signalling? That and more when I crown tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass shortly. But next, I bring you more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Plus, yes, yobs vandalising the Ministry of Defence building in London's Whitehall. But you will not believe, or maybe you will actually, what is in the Twitter bio of one of the people behind it. Stay tuned.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters, and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know what, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
That are really just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have been transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, you know, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Don't say that.
I'm right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Welcome back. It's time to give you more of tomorrow's front pages. Let's do it. Right, we've got the Sun for you. Ring of Steed. Huge crackdown at the Grand National. Cops undercover in race crowd. So the police are mounting one of the biggest ever Grand National crackdowns to stop idiot protesters repeating last year's chaos. They say a ring of steel will greet would-be invaders and undercover officers will infiltrate crowds when Aintree in Liverpool hosts 150,000 people over the 3 days. Well, there you go. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph now, shall we? Yeah, big story this. NHS ordered to reveal the fates of 9,000 trans children. So this is the follow-up of that cash report that we heard about. So NHS trusts have, so far anyway, some of them, refused to reveal the state of play, really, when it comes to now young adults, around 9,000 of them, who were moved on from the Tavistock Clinic to a variety of other providers. What state are they in? How are they doing? That's the next level to this. They've also got the international story, which they're leading with. So international, of course, is a US president talking about two Middle Eastern nations. Biden warns Iran not to attack Israel, they go for. They've also got China accused of counterfeit stamp scams. So there we go. The Telegraph going global. Let's go to the Daily Mail. Oh, yes, China is flooding Britain with fake stamps and delicious food. Rogue firms are landing thousands of innocent British victims with £5 penalties. So thousands of fake stamps are apparently entering Britain from China, and we all have to pay £5 penalties to collect them. I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe there's more to this story than meets the eye, but is that an act of war? Maybe it's an act of war. Let's go to The Guardian. Biden declares ironclad support for Israel. amid fears of Iran attack. They also go on the transgender clinics. Transgender clinics for adults face inquiry into patient care. I've still got my panel with me. We've got Director of Popular Conservatives Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Well, look, another day and another pro-Palestine stunt. With youth demand and Palestine action, can I just remind everybody, we did do an expose on them last week. We told the police, they told the police, through the medium of GB News, exactly what they were going to do. Here we are, though. No preemptive arrests. Anyway, once again, they teamed up to give the Ministry of Defence the special radical left treatment after Labour HQ was targeted on Monday. Yeah, good stuff. Well, luckily, the alarm was raised by a self-titled old man who goes by the name Revolting Hippie on X. And can I just say, keep it up there. So this is his Twitter bio, right? Old man, 1960s hippie. I know a little bit about Tibet. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do, Rangzan. Anyway, police were able to rush the scene and arrest 5 activists. Of course, the police could have saved themselves all of the bother if they had just heeded the warning that we made on this very show last week. Mark, are officers doing enough to proactively stop this kind of thing? Yep.
Look, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, yeah, you do want to proactively stop it, but I don't think a crime's been committed until it's actually been committed, right? Yep. Somebody says we're going to have a demo, we're going to throw some paint on it. Yeah, maybe they could have intervened there. I mean, my hope, I think that this sort of behaviour, I mean, it's civil disobedience, right? You're entitled to do it, but you should face the consequences of your actions. And I've only seen that clip, but I would say this is probably a few grand's worth of damage. It is deliberate criminal damage and trespass, so probably, I don't know, a few weeks in prison, few grand in a fine. If that's what was meted out, I think this sort of lunacy would stop.
Do we think any of them are working class? Of course they're not. They are posh or middle class.
That is complete speculation. We have no idea.
I'm a betting man.
There is no data.
I bet there's no working class doing that.
Okay, well,
they're all busy in their jobs trying to earn money for their families.
I mean, these are teenagers, they're students.
You've got these entitled idiots doing this.
Do you think, Rebecca, though, that there is a question to be had about whether some of these young people are being either brainwashed or easily led into getting potentially, and I will just be at pains to say that, we don't know how they're pleading in some of these things, so I just want to clear that up, but potentially end up with criminal records that could really seriously damage them for the rest of their lives. Are people taking advantage of them?
I think this has been the case for generations. People at Green and Common were told the same thing. And, I think I understand why they're angry. Like, if we are reasonably saying that people were killed by arms that were sold to Israel by the UK, that you can understand, especially when you're 17 and you feel everything that deeply, why you would feel the need to do something like that. I think you have to be empathetic for them.
I just don't see why they pick and choose in that regard, though. I mean, we did a piece here on this very show at exactly this time last night about the fact that Azerbaijan is committing ethnic genocide against Christians. We don't seem to...
I think this one feels accessible and reported, and therefore it's what they've connected to. And we all have our causes that we connect to more deeply than others. Every single one of us does.
Do you think there's any justification for spray painting the Ministry of Defence?
No, well, I don't. But, I mean, I'm a liberal-minded sort of guy, so civil disobedience and breaking the law is allowed. But you have to face the consequences for that action, right? So even if you are a peaceful protester who breaks the law, and this is, you say it might be a criminal offence, Patrick, that is a criminal offence. That is criminal damage. I mean,
I think
I'm happy to call that.
In fairness.
It is definitely criminal damage.
But the people washing it up are on minimum wage.
No, and they should wash it. No, they should be made to wash it. That's just good parenting. They should have to go and wash it
off. You can't go around throwing paint at other people's walls.
What would you do if one of your kids did something like that?
I wouldn't let them out of the house.
Ever again?
No.
For the rest of their lives.
My kids would face serious consequences. Yeah. They wouldn't get no money off of me. They wouldn't be allowed out the house.
You can make them pay inheritance tax.
They'd lose their phones. I would not suffer that, and I would probably take them down there myself and get them to scrub it.
Yeah, I would too. That's good parenting.
So, seriously, Where do you ever see the parents of these kind of people coming out and issuing their own statements going, I am sorry on behalf of
Nobody is
my
making
child.
a public statement to decry their child.
I think I would be inclined to make a public statement if someone or something that I had raised had dyed their hair blue.
No one does
started
that.
screaming about something.
I would come on GB News and say my kid has been indoctrinated.
Has been indoctrinated. Can you
come
save
on?
my
You
child?
know, you don't wash your dirty laundry in public like that. You raise your children privately at home.
These kids don't wash anything.
We just see the clip again. That's criminal damage. I hope they face the full
Give them a
consequences.
scrubbing brush and tell them to get rid of it.
All right. Now, look, it's time to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Mark, who's your greatest Britain, please?
I've gone for Dr. Hilary Cass. Yes. Thank God this report is out. It has taken 4 years, but she explained it was very difficult to do. I've not read all 388 pages, but this could draw a line under such an horrific, terrible episode in our medical history.
Yes, good start, Conor.
Mine is an honorary nomination. It's Elon Musk for supporting free speech in Brazil and fighting back against a very, very extreme Brazilian judiciary that was trying to censor Twitter and social media. So Elon Musk has really fought back on this and he's created action.
Good start. All right, go on, back up.
Mine is Queen Letizia of Spain, who's made history. She appointed the first female head of the Queen's Secretariat, which is a break in tradition for the household.
What can I just ask? Sorry, uneducated 101 over here. What is that?
It's sort of like your biggest private secretary. Is sort of the lead person, the head honcho of the royal household.
Good. So she shattered gender boundaries there. Right, today's greatest Britain is Dr. Hilary Cass. Yes, of course. Look, I mean, it kind of had to be today, I think, really, didn't it? So hopefully that report does actually lead to some serious change. Union jackass time now, Mark.
Home Office I've gone for over passport costs. They have risen to £88.50, second rise in little over a year. Unbelievable. Our passports, I'm glad they're now blue again, but are flimsy little paper documents. For £88.50, you can get a leather-bound version illustrated of Lord of the Rings. These things cost about
But that won't get you through an airport, Mark.
A tenner. It should be a tenner. It's a rip-off.
I need
it should
one,
be a
actually.
tenner. And no more than that.
Sorry, I for a second there thought that you could get your passport embossed with Lord of the Rings. That's what I thought. I was like, what?
I was comparing it to another piece of printing. It doesn't get you into Middle Earth or anything like that.
Well, if I could go and see that.
But what a rip-off. 88 quid.
My nomination is the ECHR, and it's for forcing more climate change nonsense on us. It's going to cost us money, and they are dictating our lives.
Yeah, again, another big contender, that, I think, isn't it? We did a lot on that at the top of the 9 o'clock hour. If you're watching us online or you've got rewind on your telly or however you're doing it, do go back, watch the top of the 9 p.m. I was asking if it's right that we should have a referendum on the ECHR. Go on, Rebecca, who's your Union jackass?
Mine is Samantha Markle. She has a defamation suit against Meghan Markle, and she's trying to get Kate Middleton, who is currently being treated for cancer, to give a witness statement. Read the room, Samantha.
God, I'll be honest, I wasn't aware of this, right? So I'm just going to read the headlines. Samantha Markle plans to ask Kate Middleton for a witness statement as she officially files appeal against judge's dismissal of a defamation case against half-sister Meghan. Says her recovery is a priority. Right, well, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to that sound incredibly litigious, so I'm going to swerve any comments on that. Now, I'm going to give my Union jackass today to the ECHR. Yes, they have massively overreached when it comes to climate action, and I actually think potentially hammered a nail into their own coffin. Look, thank you very much. Now, I have really, really enjoyed tonight. I'm not supposed to have favourites, but it has been my favourite show of the week so far. So thank you, and thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening at home. Just to say as well, please do go back, press your record function, rewind us, you can get it all there. Do cover what's at the top of the 10 o'clock as well. We had Graeme Linan on. That guy's been put through the absolute ringer as a result of the trans ideology that I think has frankly been warping a lot of the discourse and our institutions. He spoke out today, so make sure you go and watch that back. We have got headliners next for you. They're going to be taking you through this lot, the front pages, in even more detail in their own inimitable style, and that happens next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Well, after a rather overcast day, there's going to be more in the way of dry and bright weather on the way tomorrow. But for tonight, there's still some further rain to come. That's as these weather fronts that have lingered across the northwest continue to push into these northwestern areas, but they'll also sink further south to bring more southern areas some outbreaks of rain through the night. So it will stay fairly cloudy with drizzly rain continuing across northern Scotland, but this main rain band actually sinks further south into parts of Wales, the Midlands, and then it sits across the south coast by tomorrow morning. It's a much weaker feature, but it will bring a lot of cloud to these areas. Elsewhere, though, it should be a drier and clearer start to the day, but it's going to be a very mild start tomorrow. Temperatures not dipping much below 10 degrees for most areas. There will be quite a brisk southwesterly breeze overnight. Those winds should ease through the day, and actually across the east and the north it's going to be a dry and bright day, a much better day than today, and it's going to feel quite warm in that sunshine indeed. A different story, though, across the south and west in particular, where the cloud will linger for much of the day. We could see some drizzly outbreaks of rain, particularly across the coast and over the high ground. Now for Friday, the rain returns into the northwest. In Northern Ireland, much of western Scotland will see another fairly wet day, but the rain will be much more limited compared to today. So I think many eastern areas, even of Scotland, should get away with a fairly dry day. And across the south, well, it looks like it should be staying fairly dry as well. Temperatures still on the milder side of things for the time of year. Into the weekend, it's a similar story as well.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Mark White was saying there, Sue, that he thinks it's getting worse, and you were nodding along to that. You've seen this over decades. Situation is sprawling along the coast, more people,
yes.
And the danger is ramping up.
Definitely, because the numbers and the money it's run like a military operation. I mean, I've been told that by the National Crime Agency, and I don't need to be told it by them to know it. It is meticulous because there's so much money involved. So they're marshalling migrants here, the gangs, they're controlling the gangs, and there will be a Kingpin. You know, in some city far away in Erbil, or even in Paris, or in Brussels, who never goes anywhere near the beaches. It's like a Ponzi scheme, really.
Yeah. With that in mind, there's such vested interest, such money, such demand, a never-ending string of demand of people who want to come here.
People are already on their way, remember?
Yeah.
If we stop them now, they're already leaving. There's people leaving the Sudan now are going to reach the only place they want to get to, the French beaches, to get to the UK. They'll arrive in 2.5 years' time.
And so,
you see, they're on their way.
If it's that organised, that lucrative, that desirable, how on earth do we ever break that chain?
It sounds incredibly harsh, but I think if the EU change politically in the June elections, which I think it probably will,
yes,
I think they will put up, as the Greeks have done, holding camps all over Europe, the coasts of Europe, where people are assessed, just to see who is coming in, which would be a plus, as the Greeks have done, because we have no idea who is coming in.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive?
Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
You with GB News. The top stories this hour. The Post Office inquiry has heard today that the chairman of the mediation scheme for people who believe they'd been wrongly prosecuted by the Post Office repeatedly told the former boss, Paula Venables, that cases against sub-postmasters didn't make sense. Sir Anthony Hooper told the Horizon IT inquiry that he made the point several times that it didn't add up, that reputable sub-postmasters would be stealing sums of money. He strongly criticised the wrongful prosecutions, adding, "We need to re-evaluate how we approach criminal cases of this kind." In other news today, the European Parliament has approved a major reform of the EU's migration and asylum rules, tightening up controls. The President of the European Parliament has welcomed the adoption of a revamped migration system for the bloc today, which would reduce irregular arrivals. The EU Asylum and Migration Pact will come into force in 2 years' time. Facial imaging and fingerprinting could be implemented, and migrants may be detained during screening. The EU Parliament's President, Roberta Metsola, said this is a historic day for Europe, adding that lawmakers could now say to voters that they had answered a long-running plea for action on migration issues from citizens. 5 members of a Bulgarian organised crime group have been convicted of falsely claiming over £50 million in universal credit in the UK's biggest ever case of benefit fraud. The gang worked for almost 5 years, making thousands of false claims for universal credit using either real or fake identities. The investigation identified 3 so-called benefit factories, which were based in London, where repeated false claims were supported by forged documents, including fake tenancy agreements, counterfeit payslips and forged letters from landlords, employers and GPs. Assaulting a shop worker will be made into a new criminal offence as the government responds to a surge in retail crime. It's after a report found violent and abusive incidents against shop workers rose by 50% in 2022 to 23. The government previously said it didn't think a new change in the law was needed, but today said it would be amending its criminal justice bill to bring in the new offence. Labour says the move was long overdue and something they had campaigned for a decade. Pro-Palestine protesters sprayed red paint on the MOD today in London. 5 people were arrested for criminal damage and are in police custody. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, said the armed forces can't and won't be intimidated, adding those inside the Defence headquarters stand up to dictators and terrorists every day, adding those targeting us are the opposite, cowardly criminals whom I'm glad to see have been arrested. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle and tonight I'm joined by Steve N. Sex Appeal Allen and Nick Charity Appeal Dixon. Although, actually, you look very smart tonight.
Thank you. I don't know who wrote that, but they should get sacked immediately.
Well, you're very brutal, but that's why you wear the black shirt.
Mm.
And how are you, Steve?
Sex appeal-y, apparently.
Well, where's the tie?
There is a chance that the N in my name stands for not, if that's the way
it probably is. I don't want to know what the N in your name stands for. I like the sense of mystery that surrounds you wherever you go.
We all know what it is and you can't say on TV.
Yep. OK, well, let's start by looking at those front pages. And we're going to begin with the Daily Mail that's leading with China flooding Britain with fake stamps. It's a strange step in the Cold War. Telegraph has Biden warns Iran not to attack Israel. And The Guardian is leading with Biden declares ironclad support for Israel amid fears of Iran attack. And The Times has got sickness claims rise in Tory heartlands. The iNews has Labour plans to fix UK buses with public ownership of failing services. And finally, the Daily Star, brew, ha, ha. People are reusing their tea bags, apparently. Those were your front pages. Right, we're going to kick off this in-depth look at